The police thought it was an open and shut case. $50,000 in cash, hidden in a maid's bag. But everything changed when a 4-year-old boy said something no one was supposed to hear. Because what he revealed didn't just save an innocent woman. It destroyed a billionaire's marriage forever. $50,000 in cash, wrapped in rubber bands, stuffed at the bottom of a worn leather bag that had seen better days. And standing next to that bag, with her head bowed and her hands trembling at her sides, was a 28-year-old woman who had never stolen a single thing in her entire life. But that's not what destroyed this billionaire's world. What destroyed him was what happened next. What his 4-year-old twin son said when no one else was listening. What those innocent words revealed about the woman he had been sharing his bed with for the past 3 years. Here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. This story isn't about money. It's not about theft. It's about something far more valuable that was being stolen every single day in that house. And by the end of this story, you're going to look at every person in your life and wonder, do I really know who they are when I'm not watching? But before we dive in, I need you to do something for me. If you believe that children always know the truth, even when adults refuse to see it, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like on this video because it tells me you want more stories like this one, and leave a comment below. Tell me about a time when a child in your life saw something the adults completely missed. I read every single comment. Now, let's get into this. Welcome to Kindness Valley. David Chun stepped out of the black Mercedes with his laptop bag over one shoulder and exhaustion written across his face. 3 days in Singapore, closing a deal that would add another $200 million to his portfolio. 3 days of conference rooms and handshakes, and smiling at people whose names he forgot the moment they walked away. All he wanted was to see his boys, take a hot shower, and sleep for 12 hours straight. His house stood at the end of a private road in one of those neighborhoods where the gates had gates and the security cameras had security cameras. 14,000 square feet of modern architecture and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a private lake. A house that magazines had featured twice. A house that looked like perfection from every angle. But David would soon learn that perfection was just the mask this house wore when strangers were looking. The moment he walked through the front door, he knew something was wrong. The air felt different, charged like the moment before a storm breaks. His wife, Meredith, was standing in the center of the marble foyer with her arms crossed over her chest and her chin raised high. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her makeup was flawless as always. Her eyes were fixed on something to her left, with an expression that David couldn't immediately name. But later, much later, he would remember that expression with perfect clarity. It was victory. 2 security guards stood near the entrance. Between them, with her head bowed and her gray uniform wrinkled, stood Rosa. Rosa Martinez, 28 years old, 5 years in this house. The woman who had raised David's twin sons since the day they were born. And clinging to her legs, refusing to let go, were Noah and Ethan. 4 years old, crying like their world was ending. Noah was gripping Rosa's right leg with both arms wrapped tight around her knee. His face was buried in the fabric of her uniform. His small body shook with sobs that seemed too big for someone so little. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that doesn't stop just because an adult tells you to stop. Ethan was different. He stood slightly apart, holding Rosa's hand with both of his, staring at the security guards with an expression that no 4-year-old should ever wear. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was anger. Pure, focused, burning anger. "Ait, let her go," Ethan said. His voice was small, but steady. "Rosie didn't do anything bad. Let her go, right now." One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Meredith, then at David, clearly unsure how to handle a 4-year-old, giving him orders with the authority of someone 10 times his age. David dropped his laptop bag. It hit the marble floor with a sound that echoed through the foyer, but nobody seemed to notice because Noah's crying was drowning out everything else. "What's going on here?" David demanded. His voice came out calm because his brain hadn't caught up with what his eyes were seeing. "Meredith, what is this?" Meredith uncrossed her arms and walked toward him with measured steps. Her heels clicked against the marble with a rhythm that felt rehearsed. "I found something, David. Something I think you need to see." She gestured toward the dining table where Rosa's leather bag sat open. And there, spread across the polished wood like evidence in a courtroom, were stacks of cash. Bundles wrapped in rubber bands. More money than most people would see in a year. $50,000, Meredith said. Her voice was calm, controlled, almost satisfied. "I found it hidden in her room this morning during a routine check. I checked our household account. There was a withdrawal last month for exactly this amount. Money that was supposed to go to the renovation contractors. Money that never reached them." David stared at the cash. Then he looked at Rosa. Rosa lifted her head for the first time. Her dark eyes met his, and in them David saw something that didn't match what he was supposed to be seeing. There was no guilt there, no shame, no panic of someone caught in the act. There was something else entirely. Something that looked like resignation. Like a person watching a car crash in slow motion, knowing exactly what's about to happen and having no power to stop it. "I didn't steal this money, Mr. Chun," Rosa said quietly. Her voice was steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "I swear on my mother's grave. I swear on everything I love. This money is not stolen." "Then explain it," Meredith snapped. "Explain why $50,000 in cash was hidden under your mattress." Rosa's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the twins, then at Meredith, then at the floor. She said nothing. That silence, that heavy, painful silence, was the first crack in the foundation of everything David thought he knew about his own life. And the police arrived within the hour. 2 officers in crisp uniforms stood in the foyer, taking statements, while Rosa sat on a chair near the kitchen entrance, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere on the floor that only she could see. The twins had been taken upstairs by Meredith's instructions, but David could still hear them. Noah's muffled sobs carried through the ceiling like a heartbeat the whole house could feel. And every few minutes, Ethan's voice would cut through, sharp, insistent, demanding that someone bring Rosie back. David stood near the window, watching the police officer write in his notebook, watching his wife answer questions with the practiced ease of someone who had prepared for this conversation. But something wasn't sitting right. It was small at first. Just a feeling. The kind of feeling you get when a puzzle piece is forced into a space where it doesn't quite belong. It looks like it fits, but if you look closely, you can see the edges don't match. The feeling started with the money itself. David knew his household accounts better than Meredith realized. He knew because he had built his fortune by tracking every dollar, every investment, every transaction with obsessive precision. That withdrawal she mentioned, $50,000 to renovation contractors, he would have seen it. He would have approved it. But he didn't remember approving anything like that. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. His fingers moved quickly through the transaction history, scrolling through weeks of records. There it was. $50,000 withdrawn 6 weeks ago. But it wasn't categorized as contractor payment. It was marked as personal. M.A. Meredith Ashford's personal code. A withdrawal she had made herself. David stared at the screen for a long moment. Why would Meredith withdraw $50,000 in cash, mark it as personal, and then claim it was meant for contractors? He closed the app and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He didn't say anything. Not yet. The police officer was finishing his notes. "Mr. Chun, we have enough for now. We'll be taking Ms. Martinez to the station for processing. Given the amount involved, this will likely be charged as felony embezzlement." Felony. The word hit David like a physical blow. Rosa would go to prison. A 28-year-old woman who had never had so much as a parking ticket would spend years behind bars. Her life would be destroyed. But her family in the Philippines, her mother, her younger sister in nursing school, everyone who depended on her would be left with nothing. "Wait," David said. Everyone looked at him. "I want to review all the evidence before any charges are filed. Give me 24 hours. The officer frowned. "Sir, the evidence is fairly clear." 24 hours, David repeated. His voice carried the authority of a man who had negotiated with governments and won. "That's not a request." Meredith's expression flickered. Just for a moment, just enough for David to catch it. It was concern. Real concern. The kind that comes when a plan starts going sideways. That night, Rosa stayed in the guest house at the edge of the property. Not in a police cell, but not free either. The officers agreed to wait, though their reluctance was obvious. And they would return in 24 hours. The clock was ticking. David sat in his study with the door locked and his laptop open. The house was quiet now, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. He started with the household accounts. Every transaction from the past year, line by line, date by date. The $50,000 showed up exactly where he had seen it earlier, marked as Meredith's personal withdrawal. But there was more. Other withdrawals, smaller amounts, 10,000 here, 15,000 there, all marked as personal, all in cash, all untraceable once they left the bank. Over the past 14 months, Meredith had withdrawn nearly $200,000 in cash. Money that David had never questioned because he trusted her. Money that had vanished into a category labeled personal that he had never bothered to examine. Where did it go? David closed the banking app and opened the home security system. His company had installed it 3 years ago. Cameras in every room except the bedrooms and bathrooms. Motion-activated recording. Cloud storage for 90 days. He started with the day of the alleged contractor payment. The footage showed Rosa going about her normal routine, making breakfast for the twins at 7, cleaning the kitchen at 9, reading a story to Noah and Ethan in the playroom at 11. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Then he switched to Meredith's footage. At 2:47 p.m., while Rosa was outside with the twins in the garden, Meredith walked into Rosa's room. She looked around carefully, checking over her shoulder twice before entering fully. She was carrying something. A paper bag. David watched as his wife opened Rosa's closet, moved aside some folded clothes, and placed the paper bag at the bottom of a stack. Then she left, closing the door behind her. David's blood went cold. He checked the date on the footage. It was from yesterday. The day before she discovered the money. The day before she called security and the police and staged her perfect performance of a betrayed employer. She planted it. Meredith had planted that money in Rosa's room and then pretended to find it. She had orchestrated the entire thing from beginning to end. But why? David sat back in his chair, his mind racing through possibilities. Was it personal? Did Rosa know something she shouldn't? Was there something happening in this house that Rosa had witnessed? Something Meredith needed to make sure never came to light? As if answering his unspoken question, there was a soft knock at the study door. "Daddy?" It was Ethan's voice, small but clear. David walked to the door and opened it. Both twins stood in the hallway in their matching pajamas, Noah clutching his stuffed elephant, Ethan standing slightly in front of his brother like a shield. "We can't sleep," Ethan said. "We need to tell you something." David knelt down so he was eye level with his sons. The hallway light cast soft shadows across their faces, and he could see the exhaustion in their eyes, but also something else: determination. The kind of determination that shouldn't exist in children so young. "What is it, boys? What do you need to tell me?" The twins exchanged a look. That wordless communication that only twins seem to have, and then Noah buried his face in his elephant. And Ethan stepped forward. "Mommy is mean to Rosie," Ethan said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She says bad things. She makes Rosie cry." David felt his heart stop. "What kind of bad things?" Ethan's lower lip trembled, but he didn't cry. He was holding it together for his brother. David realized this 4-year-old boy was being strong because his twin needed him to be strong. "She calls Rosie names, bad words. She says Rosie is dirty. She says Rosie doesn't belong in our house." Ethan paused, his small hands curling into fists at his sides. "She told Rosie that if she ever tells you anything, she'll make sure Rosie never sees her family again." Noah lifted his face from the elephant. His cheeks were wet with tears. "Mommy yells a lot when you're on your trips, Daddy," Noah whispered. "She yells at Rosie. She yells at us, too. She locks us in our room and doesn't come back for a long time. But Rosie always comes. Rosie sits outside the door and talks to us through the crack. She sings us songs until Mommy unlocks the door." David couldn't breathe. The walls of his study, his perfect house, his carefully constructed life, all of it was crumbling around him. Every business trip he had taken, every time he had kissed his sons goodbye and promised to be back soon. Every night he had spent in hotel rooms thinking his children were safe and loved. They weren't safe. They were surviving. And Rosa, the woman his wife had just tried to send to prison, was the only reason they had survived at all. "How long has this been happening?" David's voice came out rough, broken. "Always," Ethan shrugged. The gesture was heartbreakingly casual. "Always." The word echoed in David's skull like a scream in an empty room. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why didn't Rosie tell me?" Noah answered this time, his voice cracking. "Mommy said, if we told you, you would send Rosie away forever. She said you would believe her and not us because we're just kids. She said, nobody believes kids." David pulled both boys into his arms and held them tighter than he had ever held anything in his life. He could feel their small hearts beating against his chest, fast and frightened like birds trapped in a cage. "I believe you," he said. "I believe every word. And I promise you, Rosie is not going anywhere. Nobody is taking her away. Do you understand me?" He felt them nod against his shoulders. But David understood something else now. This wasn't just about money. This was about silencing the one person who knew the truth. David put the twins to bed himself that night. He sat beside them until their breathing slowed and their eyes finally closed. Noah held his elephant against his chest like a shield. Ethan's hand was stretched out across the gap between their beds, his fingers just touching his brother's pillow. Even in sleep, they were protecting each other. David watched them for a long time, and with every passing minute, the weight of what he had missed pressed heavier on his chest. He had built an empire. He had made hundreds of millions of dollars. His name was spoken in boardrooms across 3 continents with respect and admiration. The world saw David Chun as a success story, the son of immigrants who had risen to the top through brilliance and determination. But what good was any of it if he couldn't see what was happening in his own home? He left the twins' room and went back to his study. There was more work to do, more footage to review, more truth to uncover. He pulled up the security recordings from the past 3 months and started watching. What he saw made him sick. Meredith in the kitchen, her face twisted with anger, pointing at Rosa while the twins watched from the doorway. The audio wasn't clear, but David could read enough from the body language. The way Rosa stood with her head bowed, absorbing every word without defending herself. The way the twins clutched each other, their eyes wide and frightened. Meredith in the living room, grabbing Ethan's arm when he reached for a cookie before dinner. The grip looked too tight. Ethan's face crumbled, but he didn't cry. And he had learned not to cry. Meredith leaving the twins in the playroom and walking away. The timestamp showed she didn't return for over 2 hours. Rosa appeared 14 minutes later with snacks and juice boxes, settling onto the floor to play with them. Again and again, the same pattern. Meredith absent or angry. Rosa present and patient. Meredith's cruelty hidden in small moments. Rosa's love visible in everything she did. Then David found the video that changed everything. It was from 3 weeks ago. Late at night, the twins were asleep, and Rosa was in the kitchen preparing their lunchboxes for the next day. Meredith walked in. She placed an envelope on the counter and slid it toward Rosa. David couldn't hear the audio clearly, but he could see Rosa shake her head again and again. She pushed the envelope back. Meredith pushed it forward. This went on for nearly a minute. Finally, Meredith leaned in close and said something directly into Rosa's ear. Rosa's face went pale. Her hands started trembling, and after a long, agonizing pause, she took the envelope. David understood now. That wasn't a bribe Rosa accepted willingly. That was a threat she couldn't refuse. Meredith had given her money, but the money came with chains attached. And when those chains weren't enough to keep Rosa silent, Meredith had used that same money to destroy her. David didn't sleep that night. By the time the sun began to rise over the lake, painting the water in shades of orange and gold, he had assembled everything. The banking records showing Meredith's cash withdrawals, the security footage of her planting the money in Rosa's room, and the recordings of her treatment of Rosa and the twins, the video of her handing Rosa the envelope late at night. Every piece fit together now. Every question had an answer. Meredith wasn't just a bad stepmother. She wasn't just cold or distant or difficult. She was something far more calculated than that. She had been running a campaign of control over Rosa, over the twins, over the entire household, all while David traveled the world, believing everything was fine. And when Rosa had finally become too dangerous, when the possibility of exposure grew too real, Meredith had moved to eliminate her permanently. Not through violence, through something worse, through the legal system itself. David picked up his phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Henry Mitchell, the best criminal defense attorney in the city, and he explained the situation in 3 minutes and sent all the evidence to Henry's secure server. Henry listened without interrupting. At the end, he said simply, "I'll have the charges dismissed before noon, and I'll need you to make a statement about what you found. This isn't just about clearing your housekeeper, David. This is evidence of criminal conduct." The second call was harder. David called his own divorce attorney. "I need you to start proceedings immediately. I want full custody of my sons, and I want it done quietly, quickly, and completely." The attorney asked questions. David answered them. By 8 in the morning, the legal machinery was in motion. At 9, David walked to the guest house where Rosa had spent the night. He found her sitting on the small bed, still in her gray uniform, her bag packed and resting by the door. She hadn't unpacked it. She had been ready to leave, ready to accept whatever fate Meredith had arranged for her. "Rosa." She looked up. Her eyes were red from crying, but her face held no hope. She had learned somewhere along the way that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I saw everything," David said. "The footage, all of it. I know what she did. I know what she's been doing." Rosa's composure cracked just slightly, just enough for David to see the exhaustion underneath. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," she whispered. "She said she would have me sent away. She said I would never see my family again. She said no one would believe a maid over a billionaire's wife." David crossed the room and sat down across from her. "She was wrong. I believe you. And you're not going anywhere. Not to a police station, not to a prison, and not back to the Philippines. You're staying right here with the boys who need you." For the first time in 5 years, Rosa allowed herself to cry in front of her employer. The police returned at noon, just as they had promised. But this time, they weren't here for Rosa. Henry Mitchell had arrived an hour earlier with 2 associates and a folder thick with documentation. He had presented everything to the officers with the calm precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. The security footage, the banking records, the pattern of conduct, the planted evidence. By 12:15, the charges against Rosa were officially dropped. By 12:30, a new investigation had been opened, this time with Meredith as the subject. David watched from the study window as the police car pulled up to the front of the house. He watched as 2 officers walked to the door. He watched as Meredith opened it with a confused smile that faded the moment she saw the looks on their faces. "Mrs. Chun, we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding false statements made to law enforcement and potential financial crimes." The words were polite, professional, but their meaning was devastating. Meredith's face went through several transformations in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, realization, and then something that almost looked like fear. She turned to look back into the house, her eyes scanning for David. When she found him standing in the hallway, watching silently, her expression hardened. "David, tell them this is a mistake." "There's no mistake," David said quietly. "I found the footage, Meredith. All of it. And the footage of you planting the money, the footage of you threatening Rosa, the footage of how you treat our sons when I'm not here." The color drained from Meredith's face. "You don't understand," she said. Her voice had changed. The confidence was gone. "I can explain everything. Just give me a chance to—" "I gave you a chance," David interrupted. "I gave you 1,000 chances. Every trip I took. Every day I trusted you with my children. Every night I fell asleep believing you were caring for this family. Those were your chances, and you used every single one of them to hurt the people I love." The officers stepped forward. "Mrs. Chun, please come with us." Meredith looked at David one last time. Her eyes were searching for something. Sympathy, perhaps, or weakness, or the love that used to live between them. She found nothing. When the officers led her to the car, she walked between them with her head high, still trying to maintain dignity even as her world collapsed. But David noticed her hands were trembling at her sides. From the upstairs window, 2 small faces watched the scene below. Noah and Ethan stood side by side, their palms pressed against the glass. They didn't cry. They didn't wave. They just watched as the woman who had made their lives so difficult was guided into the back of a police car. And somewhere in their young minds, a weight began to lift. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. It wasn't the longest legal battle of David's life, but it was certainly the most personal. Meredith's attorneys tried everything: sympathy arguments, claims of misunderstanding, suggestions that the footage had been manipulated. None of it worked, and the evidence was overwhelming. The pattern of behavior was undeniable. And when the judge reviewed the recordings of how Meredith had treated Rosa and the children, her face grew increasingly grim. Full custody was awarded to David without hesitation. Meredith received supervised visitation rights that she never once used. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was shame. Perhaps it was the realization that the only people in that house who might have loved her had never seen the real her, and the ones who had seen the real her wanted nothing to do with her. The charges for filing a false police report and evidence tampering resulted in probation rather than prison time. David could have pushed for more. Henry had told him there was a case for harsher penalties, but David didn't want Meredith to suffer. He wanted her gone. There's a difference. The day the divorce was finalized, David came home early for the first time in years. Not because there was a crisis to manage or a problem to solve, but simply because he wanted to be there. He found the twins in the backyard running through the sprinklers, with Rosa chasing them. All 3 of them laughing with the kind of joy that doesn't know anything about legal battles or betrayal or pain. Noah saw him first. "Daddy!" He came running across the grass with water dripping from his hair and crashed into David's legs with the full force of a 4-year-old who has finally learned that his father will catch him. Ethan followed a moment later, slightly more reserved but no less happy. He wrapped his arms around David's waist and held on tight. "You're home early," Ethan said, looking up with those serious eyes that saw too much. "I'm going to be home early a lot more now," David said. "I promise." Rosa stood by the sprinklers, watching the reunion with a soft smile. She had changed in the months since the arrest. Not physically. She was still the same young woman with the kind face and gentle hands. But there was something lighter about her now, something free. The fear was gone from her eyes. That night, after the twins were asleep, David asked Rosa to stay for a moment. "I need to say something to you," he began. "Something I should have said months ago." Rosa waited quietly. "You saved my sons. When I wasn't paying attention, when I was too busy building things that don't matter, you were here. You protected them. You loved them when the person who should have loved them couldn't be bothered. And I will never be able to repay that." Rosa's eyes glistened. "They're good boys," she said simply. "They made it easy to love them." But David shook his head. "Don't do that. Don't make it smaller than it is. You're family now, Rosa. Not an employee. Family." 2 years passed. 2 years that weren't measured in deals closed or contracts signed, but in smaller things, quieter things, things that actually mattered. The first time Noah fell asleep in David's arms instead of crying for Rosa. The first time Ethan laughed so hard that juice came out of his nose. The first family vacation where David didn't bring his laptop. The first birthday party where both twins said it was the best day ever and meant it. Rosa stayed, not as a housekeeper anymore, and David had promoted her to household manager with a salary that made her cry and a contract that guaranteed she could never be fired or removed from the boys' lives, regardless of what happened in the future. Her mother in Manila received enough money to retire. Her younger sister finished nursing school and started working at a hospital in the city. The monthly payments Rosa had been sending home for years, the sacrifices that nobody saw, finally bore fruit. And the twins, they flourished. They started kindergarten the following fall, walking into the classroom hand in hand with the confidence of children who know they are loved. Noah became obsessed with dinosaurs and could name every species from the Jurassic period. Ethan discovered a love for painting and filled his bedroom walls with colorful portraits of everyone in the family, said including Rosa, always including Rosa. On the twins' 6th birthday, David threw a party in the backyard. There were balloons and streamers and a cake shaped like a dinosaur wearing a beret, a compromise between Noah's and Ethan's interests. Rosa stood near the grill, watching the celebration with the same soft smile she always wore when the boys were happy. David walked over to stand beside her. "You know what I think about sometimes?" he said, watching Noah chase Ethan across the grass. "What?" "That day. The day I came home and saw you with the money and the guards, and Meredith standing there like she had already won. If I hadn't asked for those 24 hours, if I had just let them take you?" His voice trailed off. Rosa nodded slowly. "But you didn't. You asked questions. You looked for the truth. Most people don't do that, mister. Chun. Most people believe what's easy to believe." "David," he corrected. "How many times do I have to tell you? It's David." Rosa smiled. "David." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the boys play, watching the sun begin to set over the lake, watching the life they had built from the wreckage of lies and betrayal. Because sometimes the truth doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it waits quietly in the background, hoping someone will care enough to look. And when someone finally does, when someone chooses truth over convenience, love over assumption, faith over fear, everything changes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Kindness Valley so you never miss another story. And tell me in the comments, who was the real hero here? David, who finally opened his eyes, or Rosa, who never stopped loving those boys even when it cost her everything? I'll see you in the next one.